Well, thank you everyone for coming. If you just want to grab a drink or a refreshment, have a seat. Ravi has a full schedule today. So Dr. Ravi Basavappa received his Ph.D. in biophysics from the University of Chicago for studies on the structure of transfer RNA. He was then a postdoctoral scholar at Harvard Medical School in virus crystallography. Prior to joining NIH, he was an associate professor of biochemistry and biophysics at the University of Rochester School of Medicine, where he studied the structural aspects of mitotic control by targeted protein degradation. At Rochester, he was also a research scholar of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society of America and the director of the Biophysics and Structural Biology program. He joined NIH in 2004, first at NIGMS and then in the office of the director. His current responsibilities include serving as the program leader for the Common Fund High-Risk, High-Reward Research Program. And he's here as part of a site visit for my EIA award. So be nice to him and say good things to him.
I know, Perry. I know that you're there. I got the scoop. Okay. Thanks very much, Perry, and thanks very much for the opportunity to talk about the Common Fund High-Risk, High-Reward Research Program. So I thought I'd keep this presentation fairly short to allow time for questions and answers at the end. But if you have questions during the presentation, please just raise your hand or shout, and I'll try to address your question. Okay, so I'd like to begin with just a brief, broad overview. I'm at the National Institutes of Health. It's the National Institutes. It's a S. Some people think it's the National Institute of Health, but it's a monolithic entity. But it's actually National Institutes of Health because it has 27 different component institutes and centers. Each of these component institutes and centers has a particular focus of research, a disease or condition on which it focuses. For example, NIDA focuses on, the National Institute of Drug Abuse focuses on drug abuse. NIMH, the National Institute of Mental Health, focuses on mental health, and so forth. But so Dr. Zerhouni likened these 27 different institutes to 27 different fingers because they each tend to function autonomously. So he said that there really is no palm for these 27 different fingers, a palm which should coordinate the activity of each of these individual institutes. And so to help provide this coordination among all the institutes at NIH, a reauthorization bill that was passed by Congress in 2006 provides broad language. In this bill then, was established the Division of Program Coordination, Planning, and Strategic Initiatives, known quaintly as DPCIPC at NIH. I'm glad it's not D-Schenectady, which would be even more cumbersome to pronounce. But and through this bill also was established the Office of Strategic Coordination, which manages the Common Fund. And the Common Fund, through this bill, was meant to support cross-cutting trans-NIH programs that require at least 2 NIH institutes or centers, or would benefit from strategic planning and coordination. That is, the common DPCIPC provides the palm through which coordination of the activity of all the institutes can be mounted. So what is the vision for the Common Fund? Well, the Common Fund serves as a test bed for exploring different ways to support research, research that tends to be high risk, enabling programs to overcome significant obstacles or to capitalize on emerging opportunities. The Common Fund programs also typically are limited term investment. That is that most Common Fund programs can last only up to 10 years, and investment in each of these Common Fund programs is meant to accelerate the pace of discovery, again, to capitalize on emerging opportunities, to fill gaps through which research can be accelerated broadly. A little bit about the background on DPCIPC. So DPCIPC has several offices. For example, OAR, the Office of AIDS Research, focuses on supporting AIDS research across NIH. ORWH, Office of Research in Women's Health. OBSSR, or focusing on behavioral and social sciences. but by far the largest, at least in terms of budget, is Office of Strategic Coordination, the Common Fund Office. And the budget of the Common Fund Office in fiscal year 2015 is about $533 million, which is about the size of a mid-sized institute at NIH. Each of these Common Fund programs should have these 5 characteristics. Each Common Fund program, when it's developed, we should be sure that it's transformative, that the impact is should be exceptionally deep and broad. The Common Fund program should be catalytic, short-term, and goal-driven. Again, a maximum of 10 years. Some are only 5 years. Synergistic and enabling, cross-cutting, that is of relevance to multiple institutes at NIH, and novel. Programs that individual institutes or a select subset of institutes could not themselves coordinate. Currently, there are about 30 or so different Common Fund programs, and each of these has a specific set of deliverables. For example, single-cell analysis. This Common Fund program seeks to support, well, as you know, most of the biochemistry and cell biology that's done these days is on collections or ensembles of cells, because it's very difficult to analyze the behavior of cells at the individual single-cell level. But the behavior of, and so when measurements are made on collections or groups of cells, then the signal or measurement is averaged out over the group of cells. But the variation within this group of cells can vary dramatically, and this heterogeneity in behavior actually can have a big impact on the overall behavior of the system. But there's really no way to monitor the behavior of cells at the single cell level. This program then is to support technology development in single cell analysis, so that people can really then begin to see how each of the cells are behaving individually. And also, one initiative in the single cell program is the coordinated effort to determine how many different types of brain cells we have, for example, which is very well closely aligned with the new brain initiative. Another Common Fund program is protein capture. This is intended to be a pilot program. So the ultimate goal of this protein capture reagents program is to develop affinity reagents for selectively binding all proteins in the human proteome. That's a huge effort. So the pilot program is to see if there are ways in which people can, or centers can, develop affinity reagents against human transcription factors, a limited set, but to see if there are ways that can be developed that can, for renewable, scalable affinity reagents. But today I'm talking about the high-risk, high-reward research program. It has 4 component initiatives: the Pioneer Awards, the New Innovator Awards, the Transformative Research Awards, and the Early Independence Awards. So unlike all the other programs that have most a 10-year lifespan, the high-risk, high-reward research program is of indefinite length. It's the exception to the 10-year time limit, because Congress happens to like this program a lot, and it's given an exception to the life term. So, as I said, there are 4 component initiatives that form the high-risk, high-reward program, and I'll just go through each of these briefly in the order in which they were initiated. So, but first, this is a large and complex program. It requires coordination among all the institutes at NIH. So, to help coordinate this effort, then, we have a NIH Common Fund High-Risk, High-Reward Working Group, which has representatives from almost all the institutes, and they help to manage the program across the ICs. Okay, so first, the Pioneer Award Initiative. It was started in 2004. It's open to any qualified investigator, any career stage. We have had people just beginning, assistant professors, still waiting for their pipettes to come in. We've had members of the National Academy of Sciences be awardees as well. These are focus on individual scientists who have who already have established a track record of being exceptionally creative, unusually innovative, and to propose something that's really bold, that if successful could have a broad impact on the biomedical and behavioral research community. The funding has been generous, $500,000 direct cost per year for 5 years. But we've had this $500,000 level of funding since 2004, so we felt it's been time that now it's time to increase it. So beginning in fiscal year 16 with this competition, we're increasing the funding award level to $700,000 in direct costs per year for 5 years. So this is $3.5 million over 5 years. So the origin of the Pioneer Award program, well, when Dr. Zerhouni became NIH director in 2002, he surveyed the biomedical behavioral research community and asked them what they thought might be shortcomings in the NIH, especially NIH peer review process. A common theme in the responses was that peer review tended to be a little bit too conservative, and too much demand placed on demonstrations of feasibility, preliminary data, and also for expectations of details provided in the experimental plan. And because the nature of peer review tended to be too conservative, there are opportunities being lost for making leaps in science, because the conservative nature of review tended to favor projects that were more incremental, where it was pretty sure that what was proposed could actually be accomplished. But if somebody had a kind of wild idea, it wouldn't fare well in this peer review system, because the investigator wouldn't have that much data, for example. So to address this concern about NIH being too conservative in its review, Dr. Zerhouni assembled a trans-NIH working group, a different group called the High-Risk Research Working Group. And through the deliberations of this working group was developed the Pioneer Award program, which was part of what was then called the NIH Roadmap, but now it's the NIH Common Fund. We made the first awards in 2004, and awards have been made annually since then. Now, the fundamental characteristics of the Pioneer Award program, it's very much person-focused, again, on the qualities of the investigator, as he or she demonstrated already, being able to overcome substantial technical and conceptual hurdles, being unusually creative and bold and scientific vision. The Pioneer Award also provides unusual flexibility. So you're supposed to be risky projects, bold projects, and it's recognized that many of these projects, as proposed, won't work out. So one way to mitigate the risk is to invest in the person, in the investigator, so that NIH is confident that if the research doesn't work out as proposed, the investigator will be someone who can find something else to do that's very interesting and impactful with the money that's being provided. And again, providing generous resources. To implement the Pioneer Award program, we wanted to make it very distinctive from the major NIH grant program, the R01. We wanted it to be different in all aspects, from application format to review to program administration. For example, the Pioneer Award application format compared to the R01, as you know, at the time when this was developed, the R01 research strategy section was 25 pages, in which there were demands for a detailed experimental plan and preliminary data. But the major component for the Pioneer Award application is a 3 to 5 page essay in which the investigator lays out his or her vision for what he or she would accomplish with that level of funding for that duration. But we asked the applicant to address the scientific problem, significance and pioneering approach, evidence for innovativeness of that investigator, how is the research direction different from ongoing. Since it's supposed to be a Pioneer Award, it should be blazing a new path, something that's not on the expected trajectory of what that person is already doing in the lab or what other people are doing in their own labs. We also asked the applicant why the Pioneer Award mechanism, why not, for example, a standard R01. At the time, the biographical sketch limit for the R01 was 4 pages, but for the Pioneer, it was an abbreviated 2-page biographical sketch. For the R1, there are details required about the budget, animal, especially if it's over budget, so over $250,000. Also details regarding animal subjects, human subjects. For the Pioneer, there's no detailed budget. The applicants were asked to say that he or she wants $2.5 million over 5 years. But now it's $3.5 million over 5 years. No other details of the budget, how he or she would use it. And we've had some pushback. Originally, we didn't require any animal or human subject information until just in time, but we got some pushback from the legal people at NIH, and now we have. Now applicants must provide animal and human subject information in the application as well when appropriate. For the R1, there are no letters of collaboration. For the R1, letters of collaboration are encouraged. But for the Pioneer, no letters of collaboration are allowed because, again, this is very much focused on the principal investigator, his or her vision. Pioneer Award application format again. In addition, we were requiring until this year a most significant research accomplishment that as regarded by the applicant. A statement of the suitability of the Pioneer Award. Why Pioneer, not an R1? An unusual feature is that we require the Pioneer awardee to commit at least 51% research effort on the Pioneer project. So the thinking, Dr. Zerhouni wanted the Pioneer Award to be the major research effort of the awardee. And 51% research effort, so this is only research effort. It doesn't include effort towards teaching or clinical duties or other administrative duties, for example. And we also require 3 letters of reference that speak to the abilities of the investigator. So as you see, the Pioneer application format was designed very much to focus on the person and the scientific vision and to de-emphasize, again, the details of the proposal and the preliminary data. Pioneer Award review process is also different from the standard R1 review process. As you know, for the R1 review, the reviewers are people who actually know something about the topic of the application. They're experts in the topic of the application. And it's reviewed by a single panel. The reviewers are asked to consider the 5 standard review criteria: the significance and impact, innovation, approach, investigator, and environment. And the focus tends to be on approach and feasibility. So when Jeremy Berg was director of NIGMS a few years ago, he did a principal component analysis in which he tried to determine, using principal component analysis, which of the standard review criteria predicted the final outcome, the priority score. And through this analysis, he found or determined that it's the approach criterion that most strongly predicts the final priority score, which means that the reviewers tend to focus a lot of emphasis on feasibility. But for the Pioneer review, it's a different process that we use. It has 2 phases, 2 distinct review panels. The reviewers are not assigned by specific topic expertise. The way that they're asked to consider, they must consider all the 5 standard review criteria, but we ask them to strongly emphasize innovation and impact, the investigator, and the suitability for the award. And it involves in-person interviews. So again, it's a 2-phase review process. In the first phase, there's no attempt to closely match. So all the applications that are received in response to this FOA are reviewed in the first phase by electronic reviewers. These are reviewers who don't meet or either in person or by teleconference. They provide individual assessments of the application. There's no attempt to closely match reviewer expertise to the proposal topic. So the way that reviewer assignments are made in this phase is that we ask each of the applicants to self-identify the application to belong to one of 9 broad science areas, like behavioral research, molecular and cellular biology, chemical biology, instrumentation. And we ask the reviewers to self-assign themselves to belong to one of these 9 broad science areas. So in the review assignment is made by having 2 of the electronic reviewers have the same broad science area as that of the application. There's no attempt to closely match further than that. It's just random as long as they have the same broad science area. And the third electronic reviewer has a science area expertise that's not in the same broad science area, somebody who's totally outside the field. And the contention here is that something that's really pioneering should be easily appreciated by people who are well outside the field. And again, in this phase one, we asked the reviewers to focus on the proposal, the investigator, and the suitability for the Pioneer Award program. They provide brief comments and scores, but there's no discussion among these reviewers. So these phase one reviewer comments and scores are provided to a distinct second panel. So informed by the scores and comments from the first phase, the second panel identifies what it deems to be the 25 or so most meritorious applicants. And these applicants are then invited for interview to Bethesda. They come to Bethesda, interview in front of the entire panel. Each interview consists of a 15-minute presentation by the interviewee, the finalist, 15 minutes of question and answer with the panel, and then a 15-minute closed-door discussion with the panel. And it's the panelists who provide the overall priority score. The electronic reviewers, their scores don't contribute to the final score, only the interview panel scores. So that's the review process. So program administration is also different. As I said, the Pioneer awardee must commit at least 51% of the research effort. That's true only for the first 3 years, but in years 4 and 5, they can reduce their effort to 33% and 25% respectively. And this is to help them transition to other sources of funding. The Pioneer Award is not renewable. You can't submit a Type 2 application for a Pioneer Award, but you can submit another Pioneer Award application. The Pioneer awardee, again, is allowed to change the course, so this provides unusual flexibility. For an R01, the investigators are pretty much constrained by what was proposed in the project to execute the 3 or 4 specific aims outlined in the application, but we give these awardees a lot of flexibility to follow the science and enough money to be able to really capitalize on opportunities as arise to engage in collaborations when they see fit. And again, we acknowledge that not all projects will succeed as proposed. So again, that's one reason why we give a lot of flexibility. We started this Pioneer Award program quite a while ago, 2004, and we've had time to assess now, has this really been worth the investment? Has the Pioneer Award really done something special? So in 2012, we contracted with an independent entity, the Science and Technology Policy Institute of the Institute for Defense Analysis, with STIPI, and we asked them to conduct a comparison evaluation to see how effective the pioneers have been relative to other cohorts, comparison cohorts. So STIPI then, in its comparison evaluation, compared the research output of the first 3 cohorts of pioneers who received their award in 2004, 2005, or 2006, compared these pioneers to similarly qualified R01 investigators to random R01 sets, that is, random R01 awards that sum to the same level of funding as the first 3 cohorts of pioneers. And the third cohort was HHMI investigators. So STIPI, to conduct its comparison, used 2 different approaches. One was bibliometric, H-index, impact, all that sort of stuff. And that, as we all know, has its limitations. So STIPI also developed another method, expert analysis, in which it recruited experts in the research that was conducted by the pioneers, the HHMI investigators, and similarly qualified R01 investigators to take a close and detailed look at what was the research output of these awardees in terms of both innovation and impact. And when then after conducting this comparison analysis, it concluded that the pioneers have more impact than similarly qualified R1 investigators. That is, that if you give the same highly qualified individual, so we interpret this result to mean that if you give a highly qualified investigator a pioneer or an R1, he or she is able to do something a bit cooler, something more innovative than he or she could do with an R1, because these are similarly qualified investigators, and the pioneers tend to be more innovative and more impactful than R1 investigators. So it must be something about the mechanism that's providing this, and we think it's probably the flexibility. And they're about as impactful and innovative as HHMI investigators, especially when normalized by the level of funding. And you can read this evaluation. It's available through our website.
Okay. Yes. I just have an interesting comment on that. If it's the funding mechanism, wouldn't that suggest then that we should shift our funding priority to less strict?
Yeah, but again, so this is aimed at really exceptional investigators.
Sure.
So if we expanded this, then it might not be worth the investment.
Yeah, it's just an interesting way
Yeah.
to use it.
So the next award is the New Innovator Award Program, started in 2007. This was started in response to concerns that young investigators had difficulty in being funded, and they still do. It's very closely aligned to the Pioneer Award Program spirit, except here for the New Innovator Award Program, the investigator must be an early career stage investigator. That is someone who is less than 10 years from completion of Ph.D. or clinical residency and who has not yet received any significant NIH support as PI. The level of funding is also generous. It's an average of $300,000 in direct cost per year for 5 years, but it's unusual in that it's multi-year funded. This means that we provide the entire sum of money for the entire project period in the first year. So the awardee gets $1.5 million in the first year to spend over the project period. And this can be useful to beginning investigators, because some might want to spend a lot in the first year to buy a lot of capital equipment. Others might want to ramp up more slowly, add people in years 2 or 3. So it gives them that level of flexibility. Again, it's exceptional investigators, normalized by the career stage, but also people who are proposing something that's bold, and not something that you typically see in an R1 application. So again, it's very similar to the Pioneer Award Program. There's a strong focus on the individual. We give these younger folks a more pages to describe what it is that they want to do. Preliminary data are allowed but not required, and these data are provided. They will be evaluated. Most investigators actually do provide some data, although there's the danger in providing too much data, because then the reviewers will say, hey, this is eminently feasible, it can be done, this should be supported by an R1, not by the New Innovator Award. Again, the review criteria are similar for the Pioneer, and the review process also has 2 phases, but it's hard to scale up to the number of applications we receive for this award. So the second phase doesn't include interviews. So the first phase is electronic reviews of all the applications. The comments and scores from the first phase reviewers are given to the second phase reviewers, who then select a subset to discuss and score. The third research program of the NIH Common Fund HR program is the Transformative Research Award. It was started in 2009. It arose from an NIH innovation workshop and through the enhancing peer review process that took place at NIH. So although for the transformative research, and it was originally known as the TR01, but we changed it a few years ago to the TRA, the Transformative Research Award Program. Here, individuals or teams of the project are welcome to apply. The New Innovator and Pioneer, only single PI applications are allowed, and focuses strongly on the investigator. Here, when appropriate, we encourage applications from multiple PIs for the same project, multi-PI applications. The focus tends to be a little bit more on the project than the investigators, but of course, since the qualities of the investigators are also important. And this is supposed to support outside-the-box ideas, something that wouldn't fare well in NIH R01 review. And this logo, so this graphic, is supposed to represent something that's bursting outside the box. And there's no limit, no practical limit in the budget. So something that's really ambitious can be proposed. The Common Fund sets aside about $15 million a year to support competing awards. So people have successfully proposed $250,000 direct cost projects, and something full modular R1, but also others have successfully proposed something that's about $3.5 million in direct costs per year. So people are free to propose a large budget as long as it's commensurate with the scope of the project. Again, it focuses more on the project than the individual, and we encourage teams of investigators to apply. When we started the program, the application was the application was shorter than the standard R01, but we again got pushback from Office of Extramural Policy at NIH. Now we're using the standard R01 format, but we're using this R01 application packet in a very different way, where the applicant in the 12-page research strategy, we asked the applicant to directly address what it is that's being proposed, why it's a transformative research award rather than an R01, provide a reasonable timeline, why it's unusually innovative, such things. And also the specific aims page, instead of asking the investigator to provide 3 or 4 specific aims that are to be executed during the course of the research project, we ask the applicant to just distill the entire application into that one page. We ask them to describe what is the challenge or problem being addressed in the proposal, what is the expected impact if the project is successful, why is this unusually innovative, and why is it suitable for the TRA rather than an R01. The reason we use that specifications format, I'll get to, because the review process for the editorial board, it uses 3 phases. We call it the editorial board model. In the first phase, then, all the applications that we receive are evaluated by the editorial board. The editorial board consists of maybe 13 to 18 eminent scientists known for their broad scientific perspective. But they take a look at all the applications that we get. And since we get so many, hundreds of applications, they simply don't have the time to go look in detail at all the applications. They tend to focus on 3 components in this first phase. They focus on the abstract, the bio sketches, and the specific aims page, which is a distillation of the entire project. And then if their interest is captured through this initial scan, they'll look more deeply into the application. And in phase 1, the editorial board identifies a subset of applications that it thinks has the most transformative potential. And this subset of applications goes to phase 2 review, in which electronic reviewers take a look at the applications, focus. And the phase 2 reviewers are chosen to be experts in the topic of the application. They focus primarily on scientific and technical merit. And they provide feedback, and comments, and scores that are given to the editorial board, the same board as in the first phase. And then based on the reviews, the editorial board selects a further subset to actually discuss and score. And it's like an editorial board model because it's like the way a journal works. The editors of the journal get papers, they take a look and see, this is interesting maybe, so they send it forward for peer review, and then it comes back and they decide whether or not to actually publish it. Same sort of idea. The Early Independence Award Program was started in 2011. It's the baby in the program. And Harry, you might notice that this is a new graphic. Yeah. New and improved? Okay. That was started because of the extraordinary length of time it takes for an investigator to get his or her first NIH grant. Now it's 42 years old, and that's of age, and that's been the same for about a decade now. This was actually the brainchild of Dr. Collins when he became NIH director. It's one of his first substantial initiatives. And it's meant to support graduate students and clinicians who are within 1 year of degree of completion of their Ph.D. or clinical residency and who wish to skip the postdoc. That is, these are for really exceptional candidates who already have demonstrated being unusually productive or being unusually creative, have the leadership skills to lead a laboratory, have the scientific vision, compelling scientific vision, and they really have the fire in the belly to pursue their own research ideas rather than doing a typical postdoc. So the idea is that for most investigators, the typical postdoctoral training is still of great value, but there is a small subset of people for whom postdoctoral training isn't necessary, and for whom actually doing the postdoctoral training would actually unnecessarily delay their entry into an independent research career. So for this then, and we acknowledge that supporting such a small number of people really isn't going to lower the average age for people getting their first R01, but we're hoping that the impact will be catalytic, that institutions will begin to recognize more broadly that, there are really very talented investigators who maybe haven't completed their second postdoc, with 5-6 years of postdoctoral training, that there really are a lot of viable candidates out there, and for whom, and that there are years of creativity that are just not being harnessed because of the expectation that people will go through extended postdoctoral training. The level of funding is, I think, quite generous. A full-sized modular R01, $250,000 in direct costs per year for 5 years. Some unusual features of the Early Independence Award program is that each institution is allowed to submit up to only 2 applications, so there's some sort of internal vetting that must take place. We place this limitation because the institution is very important. The institution must really be committed to providing an appropriately nurturing environment to the awardee, providing independence, but also providing safety net so that people are watching out, just in case. These are young people, just to make sure that if things go a little bit off track, there are people to help nudge that person back on track. It uses a standard R01 application packet, but with applicants focusing on program-specific topics. Again, much like the Transformative Research Award application packet. 3 to 5 letters of recommendation are required, and the review process is similar to that of the Pioneer. So all the applications are reviewed in the first phase by electronic reviewers, but in this case, they're topic experts. They provide comments and scores. And these are given to the second phase panel, the interview panel. The interview panel then selects about 30 or so of the most meritorious applicants. These people are then invited for interview in Bethesda or Washington. In each interview then the finalist gives a 5-minute, I think Perry remembers this vividly.
It's a very loud clock.
Yeah. So each interview consists of a 5-minute presentation by the finalist, 15 minutes for discussion with the panel, and then 10 minutes of closed-door discussion about the applicant. And then the interview panel provides the final scores from which the overall party score is calculated. An unusual feature is that site visits are conducted in the first year of the awardees to the awardees institution, so that's why I'm here, to see Perry. And because this is still an experimental program, this is an unusual way to support scientists. We want to make sure that the awardees are on the trajectory as we hope they are, and that we're actually not doing some sort of disservice by letting them go free and go crazy. Okay. And that's one reason why all the awards remain as OD, or Office of the Director Awards. For the other 3 initiatives, Pioneer, Innovator, and Transformative Research Award, once we know that, so all the applications come in as Office of the Director, or OD awards. And once we recognize that an award is imminent for the Pioneer, Unnovator, and TRA, we reassign that application to the scientifically most relevant institute. But for the Early Independence Award, it stays as an OD award. Okay, and an unusual feature of the entire program is that we have NIH Common Fund High-Risk High-Reward Symposium. When we first started, initially we had only the Pioneer Symposium for Pioneer awardees. Later we included the Innovators. When we started the Early Independence Awards, we had a separate symposium for the Early Independence awardees, but beginning about 3 years ago, we decided to just invite all the high-risk, high-reward awardees to a single symposium, the HR Symposium. And I liken it to the Lollapalooza of science, because these are remarkably diverse scientists and some of the most creative scientists in the country. It's I think, an outstanding symposium, not only for the level of presentations, but also for the breadth of topics we covered in principle, the broad mission of NIH in the symposium. It's an open meeting, but only the awardees are allowed to present. And if you want to check it out, we have the videocast archive from last year. And the upcoming HR Symposium is scheduled for December 7th through the 9th on the NIH campus. So if you have any wild and crazy ideas, the receipt dates are unfortunately not that far off, early October, mid-October, for the Pioneer and Innovator and Transformative Research Awards. The Early Independence Awards, typically the receipt date has been late January. That's still the case. I think we've been doing some analysis internally about whether we should modify the eligibility requirements, and so I think those will be made more public once the FOA is published. But if you want to check out the Common Fund NIH, the NIH Common Fund website is very informative. And, thank you. Any questions?
Let's do maybe 10 minutes for questions.
In comparison to the R01, do you need to identify an institute and talk to a program officer prior to submitting one of these? Or is research that applies to multiple institutes, or could it?
Yeah, so these are, it's a good question. These are Common Fund initiatives, so by default all the institutes are involved. But it's a complicated question because, well, a few years ago we changed the funding scheme. Originally, funding decisions were made by Common Fund, using Common Fund money. But since the HRHR program is taking such a large slice of the Common Fund budget and projected to take about half in the next few years, we decided to try to redistribute the funding for the institutes. So for Pioneers and TRAs then, for the last few years, we've been asking the institutes to identify applications that they would like to support. And then for those applications, the Common Fund will provide the first year funding, and the institutes will provide the out years 2, 3, 4, and 5. But I think we're coming to some sort of equilibrium now where the Common Fund will be committing to even the out year funding, with the expectation that institutes will be providing funds as well. But for the New Innovator and Early Independence Awards, the Common Fund still provides money for most of the awards, with the opportunity for the institutes to pick up additional awards. Is that answer?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yes.
Could you give us some idea of the statistics for the Pioneer Award, how many applications are received, what the hit rate is?
Yeah, so the number of applications varies from year to year, but somewhere between 200 to 400 applications, and the success rate is typically between 4 and 6%.
I have a similar question to hers, and if somebody applies for an Early Independence Award, say they aren't associated with an ongoing university, what do you suggest people do about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it is a choreography. There needs to be a choreography that needs to take place between the applicant or the candidate and the host institution. the candidate doesn't necessarily need to be at the institution where he or she would do the work upon award. And it can be difficult for a candidate to identify a potential host institution. To help facilitate that, we've set up on our website a web portal in which institutions can register interest in hosting candidates. So we ask the institutions to provide information about any particular areas of research that they would be willing to host candidates in, and contact information. So in principle, the prospective candidates then can go to the website, take a look at the institutions that are interested, and contact them. But frankly, the response from the institutions hasn't been that robust. I'm not sure why. So we're trying to figure out.
Is it limited to United States universities?
Yeah. So the awardee institution must be a domestic institution, but there are no citizenship requirements for the awardees, for the recipients.
Thank you.
Under the transformative awards, part of the definition was to create a paradigm.
Right.
So is there an operational definition being applied to what's a paradigm, what represents a paradigmatic shift, or
Well,
how do we know we got it?
Reviewers know it when they see it. But if you want to take a look at what's been proposed successfully, you can go to our Common Fund website, and we have lists of all the recipients for all 4 initiatives.
Oh, that'd be helpful.
And links to abstracts, so you can get a sense of the scope of what's been proposed.
And we can call you.
Sure.
Yeah.
The best way to contact me, if you want, is I have a website, www.scheduledonce.com/Ravi Basavappa. And through that you can arrange time to talk, but I need to have more slots. I will in the next couple of days.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Could you speak to how NIH may incorporate interest in funding social science research?
Yeah, so we do for these, for the HRHR program. So there seems to be no particular bias for or against social science research. It's certainly within the mission of NIH, and the relative paucity, the paucity of awards in social science or behavioral research is due primarily, I think, just that we don't get that many applications in that area. But if you look, you can see that there are certainly awards made in those areas.
Okay, thank you, Ravi.